I'm about to transition to the next video because we are going to see our favorite fake moderate, fake nuance man, Piers Morgan.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages.
So this is the big one. Biden has pardoned more people than all the prior presidents put together. I don't know what to make of it. They lost, as you said, the moral high ground. I agree with
system for political means, but maybe the reason he fears it is the 4-year lawfare on Trump, which came from Democrats. Well, the J6 pardons are worth debating, and we will, but Democrats might find that the moral high ground has fallen beneath them, and that Joe Biden has dug the hole. And we'll debate with my panel in a moment, which includes a...
So even when he's talking about January 6th, he has to shit on Democrats. Oh, Pierce is so funny. He's such a funny guy. He's so silly. Pierce is so silly. Hold on. Hey, homie, you stream so really well. That's why I followed you to see Stream Love, but yet still not affiliate partner. I got a proposal for you. I'll share your stream to a kick community for you to hit 100,000 followers, 700 views, or nothing less. Add me on Discord if you're interested. Probably not. I don't want bots. It's just, you know, it's not ethical. You know what I'm saying? It's not ethical. All right, let's dive into this.
Former Capitol policeman served on January the 6th, and someone who's just been pardoned by President Trump. But before that, I'm joined by the historian and author of The End of Everything, Victor Davis Hanson. Victor, great to have you back on Uncensored.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on with these pardons. Obviously, the actual idea of a presidential pardon is not new. Every president does it in varying degrees and varying numbers. But what do you make of two things here? Well, we'll start with Biden. Biden doing all these preemptive pardons before we've even seen any evidence of crimes being committed or potentially court cases to adjudicate whether they've been committed or any potential prosecutions. What do you feel about that as a principle, and how much of that has gone on in the past?
Well, that's only happened one time in American history. That was Jerry Ford's preemptive pardon of Richard Nixon. And so if you look at all of the pardons through the Biden tenure, Biden has pardoned more people than all the prior presidents put together. So it's not just the nature, but it's the magnitude. Some of them, as you pointed out, were egregious. Mr. Peltier murdered 2 FBI agents, and that sentence was commuted. So, and then...
I already think that Joe Biden's pardons was weird. But you know what's interesting? Even on a show where the focus should be on Donald Trump's pardons, he has a whole beginning intro segment to crap on Joe Biden's pardons, which, fair enough. Although, I feel like he's already had a whole episode to crap on Joe Biden's pardons. But he has to make sure that he doesn't lose his Donald Trump MAGA huge support base. So he has to make sure he shits on Democrats as much as possible. Because Piers Morgan is a fake objective analyst. But I think he's going to say everything that I kind of agree with. Joe Biden's pardons are wild. It's not wild. I understand the logic why he pardoned. I just don't like it. Now, is Joe Biden's preemptive pardons and Joe Biden's pardons for his family and all that stuff on the same level as Donald Trump pardoning January 6ers? Hell freaking no. Hell no. Not at all. Not at all. So let's see. Let's wait. Let's get into it.
I know you've been doing and itching to do about Trump's abuse of the pardon system as you see it, given Joe Biden's obvious blatant abuse, which we've just heard from Victor Davis Hanson, unprecedented apart from when Ford pardoned Nixon. We've never seen preemptive pardons like this. How neutered do you feel? Do you feel like every time you try and go after Trump for this, everyone on the right will go, hang on, what about your guy?
Yeah, you.
No, I'm not worried about that at all. And it's interesting that I never thought I'd be old enough to share a panel with a violent insurrectionist who voluntarily joined a mob incited by Trump to overthrow a free and fair election. But this is America. And to answer your question, Piers, I actually want to read very quickly some words by an author who I agree with, who shares my sentiments. I'm going to quote him very quickly. The Republican Senate cowards should hang their heads in shame. Pretending the Capitol riot wasn't a Trump-inspired insurrection is as deluded as saying 9/11 had nothing to do with bin Laden's terrorism. The author continues, and I completely agree with this author, that Donald Trump was the man whose ugly, violent rhetoric directly led to what happened on January 6th. He took the most powerful megaphone in the world, and he screamed at his enraged, unhinged, diehard fan base to go to the Capitol that day and fight for his presidency, that he lied about being stolen from him. So that's exactly what thousands of them did. Many of the rioters have said it in their own words, that it was Trump's command that drove them to the Congress. And finally, shame on Donald Trump for continuing to perpetuate a grotesque, inflammatory lie that threatens to imperil the very foundation of American democracy, end quote. That was you, Piers Morgan, 4 years ago in the Daily Mail. I share your sentiment.
Yeah, it was me. That is what I wrote at the time. That is what I felt at the time. And I didn't think we'd ever see Donald Trump run for office again. I was wrong. Not wrong
what
about.
changed?
I wasn't wrong about the
What changed?
sentiments I expressed that day. I thought it was horrendous. However, the pardons have happened. Jacob Chandler, you became incredibly well known because of the image of you as a QAnon
Donald
shaman at the
Trump.
time.
What
I
changed
believe
is
you've
Piers
now
Morgan
renounced
got a
QAnon.
lot more money. Piers Morgan got a lot more clout and fame because of Donald Trump. He got a lot more MAGA because of his increase of. He got a lot more support because of his increase of MAGA followers, and he's become a right-wing shill who pretends he's nuanced. That's what changed. That is what changed.
You're no longer a QAnon identifying person. A, is that correct? Can I just verify that with you?
QAnon is a fiction created by the mockingbirds and the media to discredit Q and the anons that follow Q. So,
Okay.
So he didn't denounce it at all, Piers. He didn't denounce it at all, Piers. Say something now. Say something. He didn't denounce it at all. You brought this MFR on. So what do you got to say, Piers?
I was never a part of any QAnon, community. I've always, just followed Q.
What do you say to Wajahat, who's just
Okay, says nothing about it. Yeah, Piers is a fucking coward.
obviously let you have it with bells on and thinks that dangerous insurrectionists, as you put it, should never be pardoned in the way that they have been? What's the response?
He's entitled to his opinion. I believe in freedom of speech, even if I disagree, especially if I disagree with what he says. He's allowed to be wrong in America. That's perfectly fine. I
Freedom
really
of
don't
speech
care
is
he
not what you
thinks. I
did,
know what
brother.
the day was. I know what it was for me personally and what it's been for literally thousands of American families across this country. Having the government weaponized against you is the very thing that people on the left used to cry about all the time until they got in office and they were able to weaponize the government against their political opponents, which is exactly what happened. And the media did their bidding too. They were their handmaiden. The real question we have to ask ourselves is,
MAGA
what is
talking
the
points.
devious and nefarious hand inside of the government glove, or has been inside the government glove for the last several decades and the last 4 years, that's doing all this to the American people and circumventing the Constitution in the name of a state of emergency?
Okay, I mean, my question for you,
What are you
watching those
talking
scenes on
about?
January the 6th that day, was surely no American could watch those scenes and not think it was a shameful moment for America. Whatever the motivation for what was behind it, whatever
All right,
people
come
felt
on,
they'd been
Piers.
encouraged or otherwise to do by
Keep the
Donald Trump,
pressure up.
the fact that a very large group of people basically tried to ransack the Capitol in the way that happened, the home of democracy in America, those images went around the world, and the world was genuinely horrified, Jacob. How do you feel when you look back at those images?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What would you do if you found out that the whole thing could have been prevented?
Okay, let's hear. See, maybe it's time, because at some level I really want to give Pierce the benefit of the doubt that he just truly believes in certain aspects of what he's saying. He truly believes that this is in the best interest of the country. But then when you have a situation like this where it's obvious that his values against like when it's so apparent, it's like, okay, violence like this is not excusable. It's like, fine, I'm with, like, Pierce is going like, yeah, that's not acceptable. Now it's to see, all right, time to go against a guy who is blindly loyal to Trump. Will Pierce push back? Let's
It's
hear
actually
it.
government orchestrated, and all the blood that happened on January 6th is on the hands of people like Nancy Pelosi, Yogananda Pittman, Mark Milley, all the people that Victor David Hanson just talked about. They're the ones that set this whole thing up. This thing has the fingerprints of a regime change all over it, and our government has become expert level at regime change. The media wasn't talking about Sergei Devinin, the known Ukrainian spy that was in the crowd on that day, and actually asked to take a picture with me, as funny as that is. The FBI asked
Well, let me ask you,
who this is. I said,
Jacob, before I
no.
go, okay,
So, like,
Jacob, hang on. Jacob, before I go to Winston to respond, because he was there, he was a police officer that day at the Capitol. But why were you doing it then? I mean, presumably you weren't told to do it by somebody from the FBI or any of these other theories that have been propagated since. What was your purpose in storming the Capitol that day? What did you want to achieve?
You asking me?
Yes.
What my purpose of storming the Capitol?
Yeah.
Look, dude, I didn't storm anything. I entered the building illegally to stop vandalism, violence, and theft, which was proven.
So he's admitting all the things he's wrongdoing. He's just changing the terminology. He's done that every single time. He's one of the worst and most evil type of people. Like, I can't reach this guy. He's gone. Absolutely.
All on video by me stopping somebody from stealing 30 seconds getting into the building, volunteering to help the police. That's why I was escorted to the Senate chamber, and also like saying a prayer inside the chamber, and then stopping people from breaking in when I was outside the building. I literally stood in front of an angry mob and told everybody to go home because Donald Trump said to go home. I played his tweet. I played his video tweet on my megaphone, told everybody to go home. I stood in front of an angry mob trying to break into the Capitol, and none of this was said in the media because their narrative was a house of cards. I was their Achilles heel, and Tucker Carlson knew that, and that's why he aired that footage, and he totally destroyed the Mockingbird media's narrative about January 6th.
Okay, let me go to Winston. You were there that day. You're a Capitol police officer. What are your feelings about the fact that everyone involved has been pardoned, even the ones who were violent to police officers?
I think it's very unfortunate that particularly those that were violent and who attacked both me and my fellow officers that day are able to walk totally free. It sends a horrible message to Americans, to the world, to law enforcement, not only Capitol Police, DC Police, who have
Piers
continued
Morgan
to
did
show
not
up
push
every day,
back
do their
once
jobs
against
in
what that
service
guy.
to others, in service to the American people, to Congress. And,
I'm gonna let this guy cook. He's the police officer. I'm gonna let him cook. But just notice how, if that was on the other side, Piers Morgan would have interrupted, added this context, and say something. He just let him go on and say whatever he wanted, even though he's supposed to be against the January 6th riot, because he knows that that would upset his fan base, his MAGA fan base. Just notice these things. Just notice these things.
it basically says that it's okay to do political violence against and beat police officers. It says that there's nothing wrong with that.
Do you think there's a...
No, what says that that's okay is the BLM riots. It says that's okay is the Antifa riots, and there being no prosecutions. That's what says that's okay. It's attacking federal buildings and no prosecutions. That's what says that's okay. Forgive me for saying, I don't mean to interrupt, but the double standard, what Victor Davis Hanson was talking about, the asymmetrical justice system, is on full display. And to deny that the Antifa and BLM riots didn't play a role in
Actually, let me lower my green screen. Sorry, will I edit this out? Hopefully I do. I gotta edit this filter. All right, let's change this.
the demoralization of our police officers and the allowance of this crime spree all across the country is just absolutely silly. The idea that is not to blame is silly.
Well, it's an interesting point, Winston, isn't
Well,
it?
whataboutism, though.
It's an interesting point,
Whataboutism.
Piers.
I was a police officer for 5 years. I worked in 2020, the summer in DC. I will not condone any violence against police for whatever political cause, whether it was then on January 6th. And I'm glad we can agree on that. But the difference is that on January 6th, it was not just a riot on the street. There were those like yourself that entered this building illegally and others who were violent against us. And it had never happened before. Not since the War of 1812 and 1814, when the British stormed the Capitol, had this ever happened. Not since the Civil War had been so divided.
Allow me to apologize. Please allow me to apologize on behalf of all January 6ers and all Trump supporters for what happened to you guys. I don't know if that's happened on live television yet, but allow me to apologize to the police on behalf of all.
Give me a break. Because he's not remorseful. It'd be one thing if he's remorseful for everything he's done, but he's not. He's not. This is a condescending gesture to make it seem like his side is not as bad as the BLM rioters, not as bad as the Antifa guys, because I apologize, even though I rephrase and change the terminology of everything that is accused of me and tries to contextualize all our actions that happened. But I'm gonna apologize. Give me a freaking
All
break.
J6ers and all Trump supporters for what happened to you guys on that day is absolutely terrible. And if you find out that your own Capitol Police people like Yogananda Pittman or Tom Manger are covering up what actually happened and the fact that they put you in harm's way, I think you guys have a vested interest in a class action lawsuit for your own work environment putting you guys in harm's way.
I appreciate that apology. I think, though, the bigger picture is, as an officer, we never victim blame. When a crime is committed against somebody, it is not their fault. And it's more important to look at the bigger picture. Why was that crowd there that day? Who sent them? I remember people telling me that day on January 6th, President Trump sent us here. We are going to get in that building, and thinking there's no way they're going to be so violent, so brutal to actually get past us and break inside, until very shortly after I'm seeing for my own eyes that I was wrong and that the mob, was. And again, could Capitol Police have been more...
Were you talking to Ray Epps? Is that who you were talking to?
Well, I want to ask Winston a question, which is this. Winston, do you see a difference?
He just lets him interrupt. Piers is so spineless. He just lets him interrupt. But if this was the other side, if this was on the left, interrupting, going on these tangents, saying these terrible things, he would have stopped him. I am trying to give Piers the benefit of the doubt. I'm trying, but the inconsistency is glaring.
Between people that day who committed acts of violence against police officers and people like Jacob here who did not. I mean, do you see a qualitative difference between the two? J.D. Vance said he could see an argument for pardoning the non-violent rioters, and I see that argument. They'd all been imprisoned, almost all of them, and many people felt some of the sentencing was way over the top for non-violent acts. Do you see a difference between the two?
I do see a difference, of course. Somebody who just entered the building illegally did not commit as bad an act as those who used a stun gun against, my fellow officers, who used bats and 2x4s, bear spray against us. Of course, there is a difference there. I'd like to think some people there that day normally would respect police. They had Blue Lives Matter flags. I like to think that some of those people just perhaps got caught up in the moment and make mistakes. However, no, we all make mistakes, but we must be held accountable for our actions. The justice system imposed, these people got due process. Trump says they're hostages. It acts like they, were victims of this. They're only victims of their own actions. And so, sure, I can see a difference. But again, when you put a blanket pardon like this, particularly those who were violent, it is offensive. And I know Capitol Police officers today who are still working, very upset by this action. Why should they continue to do their jobs every day if violence against them is just not going to matter?
Right. And Jacob, before I go to Vinny,
and that rationale that rationale applies to Joe Biden and all the pardons he just put out.
Yeah, we're going to come to that, Jacob.
Versus the
Jacob, before I go to Vinny for his
What
response,
about? Go, Oh man. I wonder if this guy's gonna have the character to criticize the Jan 6 pardons. I wonder if he's gonna have the character to do that. Because this guy is just gone. He's gone. He's in the clouds. He's just an insane, batshit crazy individual, bro. I wonder if he has some rationale and reasonability behind him.
Patiently. I would just ask you the same question. Do you see a difference yourself? I mean, what do you say about those on the day who did commit acts of violence against police officers? Do you see a difference between them and people like you?
Yes, I do, to be perfectly honest with you. But I respect the president's decision to pardon those people, and I'll tell you why. Because what happened in 2020 with the riots and what's happened with the pardons that Joe Biden has put out there, attention has to be drawn to that. And Donald Trump pardoning some...
I can't listen to this guy. I can't, bro. I just can't. I can't listen to this. He's just insane. His delusion is too strong, man. I can't. There's nothing productive for what he's saying.
That's fair enough. But just to be clear, you do condemn the people who
He's trying so hard to frame it like he's a rational person, but if it was only, I hate to use that, but like this is Piers Morgan though. I've seen so many times where the left is trying to say something and he interrupts and adds this context and doesn't give them this guy this same level of grace, but this guy who stormed into the Capitol, he's giving so much grace for. It's crazy to me.
committed acts of violence that day. The rioters who
This is embarrassing, Piers.
I just answered your question.
It's a yes. Just to be clear, I don't want to misquote you, so I'm just pinning you down to say yes.
Well, then play the tape back, buddy.
Well, you said you condemn acts of violence, so by definition, I'm assuming you are condemning the rioters who committed acts of violence.
Now you're starting to think for yourself.
Well, can you just say yes or no?
This is what happens, Piers. This is what happens when you bring these type of people on. Oh, this is embarrassing. This is You know what? Just to rub it in a little bit.
The people who act, that's
If you cooperate with an evil system, you contribute to its evil. That's Gandhi right there, and that's truth. So I believe in nonviolent non-cooperation.
So is that you would condemn the people who committed acts of violence against police officers?
I believe that they have served their time enough and they've felt the full weight of the government,
That's not a question.
something that
That's not a
very,
question.
very few people.
That's not my question.
I condemn violence that happened on January 6th, but I also agree with the pardons.
That's fair enough. But just to be clear, you do condemn the people who committed acts of violence that day, the rioters who were violent.
I just answered your question.
It's a yes. Just to be clear, I don't want to misquote you, so I'm just pinning you down to say yes.
Well, then play the tape back, buddy.
Yo,
Well, you said you condemn acts of violence. So by
hilarious.
definition, I'm assuming you are condemning the rioters who committed acts of violence.
Now you're starting to think for yourself.
Well, can you just say yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. Listen, you know what? I actually appreciate that honesty. I appreciate
Yo, ain't no fucking way I actually appreciate that honesty, bro. What the? I'm gonna let him finish.
the candor. I think it moves the debate to a better place when people on all sides of this can concede things which actually we should all agree on.
Bro, he was this is why I hate Piers' guts. That spine. Oh, I don't want to be super aggressive, but bro, he's supposed to be a voice of reason, and it just doesn't make sense how he's acting. It just doesn't for me. It doesn't make sense how he's acting, because I've seen how he's like steadfast, adding all this context, how he's criticizing Democrats and the left. This guy is being one of the most difficult guests to you individually I've ever seen on this platform. He's being difficult on purpose. He's not answering a question. He's being condescending. He did something. He was a part of something that you said you don't like. And you're saying, oh, I appreciate that honesty. You are so, bro, I don't want to be that guy, but like, it's so frustrating when you see something like this, bro. It's so frustrating. The inconsistency is like Piers is supposed to be the moderate
Be an argument
channel.
about whether Trump should have pardoned them. There should be no argument, especially when we have one of these police officers sitting in this panel, that violence against police officers is never acceptable and should always be condemned. Vinny, you've been very patient.
100%.
Vinny, let me bring you in. Actually, a really interesting debate, this. And I honestly, all of it has been fascinating to me. And to actually have one of the people who's been pardoned next to one of the police officers and reaching some points of agreement, I think is a really important thing.
Points of
Vinny, what do you feel
agreement.
about
You're
this?
a coward.
The
Piers.
Republicans were split. Many Republicans,
such a
including JD
coward.
Vance, did not want the ones who were violent against police officers to be pardoned. It does seem to fly in the face of what most Republicans would think, which is if you commit an act of violence
All right, let's
against
dive
police,
into this
you should not
conversation.
be pardoned. What do you think?
Well, first, Piers, I want to congratulate you. Your friend finally inaugurated into the White House. He's going to stop this bleeding that's been happening with this country. I was there, Piers. I sent your producers a bunch of videos. The guy's done more in 3 days than Joe Biden has done his entire career. The moment we saw him at the Capitol,
Right.
he sat down and started citing executive orders and got to business. Number one. Number two, Piers, in regards to the Jan 6 and all the pardons and everything, I've met Jacob in person. What the media told us about this guy, he's a monster. He did this. I met him in person. I interviewed him.
Oh, he's friends with the January 6ers. Okay, so nothing rational is about to be said. Okay. Okay. It's like, okay.
Amazing guy, great heart. He's intellectual. He knows what he's talking about. He loves this country, okay? And what happened on January 6th, I know Watt said something about free and fair election. That's what you believe. The American people don't believe that. The majority of us, 81 million votes, all the discrepancies, FBI at Twitter, all the cheating or election interference. I think that day, in regard to Winston about January 6th, my heart goes out to him because to me, he was a victim. For Nancy Pelosi and all them, holding back 10,000 National Guard troops, all the games playing, he was a pawn in the game of destroy Donald Trump no matter what, okay?
Oh,
The
but
violence-
Vinny,
what about all the
Vinny, let me ask you though, Vinny. But Vinny, I mean, look,
This is embarrassing, Piers. This is embarrassing. Like, this is like should have been cutthroat. You already said you disagree with January 6th. This should be so easy for you to give your honest opinion. But no, that doesn't make you money. Being honest, being objective doesn't make you money. It doesn't.
that may well be the case. That may well be the case. But it doesn't change the fact that thousands of people, as part of a large group of people, did storm the Capitol, and many of them broke in, and some of them committed acts of violence against police in the process. None of that, I mean, all of it looked appalling. To the rest of the world, it looked like America lost its mind, right? But when you look back on it now, we can debate the nuances of who should have been pardoned and so on. I do think some of the more peaceful protesters got way too big sentences, for what it's worth. I don't think they were all violent. They shouldn't be treated the same way. But I do think any violence against police officers, I'm staggered that Donald Trump has pardoned them. Honestly, I am. I wouldn't have done it if I was there. I agree with JD Vance's position on that.
Yeah. Yeah, but Piers, okay, and Piers, by the way, I was a military police in the United States Air Force. Any violence,
I don't
period,
care.
I'm not for it. But that day, Piers, let's think about it. Where was the insurrection? Who had the guns? Who was violent? The FBI.
Okay. See, Piers. Are you? I wonder if he's seeing it. I wonder if he's finally seeing it. I doubt it. I doubt it. He's not gonna say anything of substance. He's gonna excuse all the actions, and he's not gonna condemn it at all. So let's see if Piers push back. So if Piers says something right here, I think.
Inside the Capitol, unless we have all those facts, Piers, you don't know who was actually at fault and who was doing what.
Okay, I mean, what I would say about, we now know that they were cheated. Actually, we don't, because there's never been any evidence produced that that 2020 election was rigged. Donald Trump keeps saying it. I wish he wouldn't. He doesn't need to say it. He's won big now. He doesn't need to go back over that again.
All right, Piers,
Actually,
push back a little
including
bit.
Republican judges, nobody has ever found any concrete evidence that that election was rigged. So the reason why people...
Okay, Piers. Okay, Piers. Finally, a little pushback. Finally, maybe he's like, bro, they're just doing way too much. I can't take it anymore. It reached the boiling level, and he's finally pushing back. Okay, let's hear you. Come on, Piers.
Hang on, Vinny. The reason why people were protesting...
Oh, he even stopped the MAGA supporter. This is uncharted territory, people. This is uncharted territory. Let's hear you out. Let's go.
I certainly believe that. But the reality is it's never been backed up by actual hard evidence, even by Republican judges who've studied it. So this premise that somehow it was illegally stolen from Donald Trump the first time, I said it to his face, and I believe it now, just as I still believe what I wrote in that column that Wajahat quoted from earlier. I just think that there are certain things where people can continue to say it was stolen and rigged and so on, but you've got to actually at some point stump up the hard evidence, and it's never happened.
May I say something, Piers?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Hang on, Vinny. I'll come back to you. Let Wajahat respond, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, Piers, look, you have
okay.
disagreements, but we have agreements. And I read that part of your column because I agree with it. Shame on Donald Trump for continuing. This is the key word. Continuing to perpetuate a grotesque, inflammatory lie that threatens to imperil the very foundation of American democracy. What is that lie? That he won the 2020 election that he lost. And you and me, we've been on your show before, we've talked about it. It's time for him to move on.
Yeah, I agree.
He won 2016, he won 2024. He continues to perpetuate this lie. To the point, Piers, where now 80% of Republican voters believe the lie. And some of them were incited by that lie, invited by Donald Trump. In fact, Jacob's former attorney said that Jacob was a guest of Donald Trump, that he was duped by Donald Trump, that he apologized for being there. That was Jacob's former attorney, right? These people were there. These are regular Americans.
Former attorney.
I said former attorney.
Former attorney.
Former attorney. These people were fellow Americans. These people were fellow Americans. They weren't evil. They didn't have horn on their heads. They truly thought that this election was stolen, which it wasn't. No proof has come out that it was stolen. Joe Biden won, just like Donald Trump won in 2024.
But do you accept? All right, but Jaha, do you accept the argument? Hang on, guys. But Jaha, do you accept? Because I do, that there was a clear double standard in the way that people who protested through the BLM months of extreme violence in many cases, trashing institutions.
What does that have to do with the current conversation? Like, Piers, you were here, you were discussing, you were being a tiny bit objective. What does the BLM riots have to do with this current conversation? What does that have to do with the actions of the people who did what they did? Oh my gosh, bro. It's like
Institutions and buildings, attacking police. I mean, a lot of people were involved in this. That there was a clear double standard in the way that they were collectively treated by the justice system and the way that the 1,500 January 6th protesters were treated. Do you accept there's been a clear double standard here?
I think there's been an obscene double standard, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because if BLM members, if Black, Muslim, Indigenous Americans were to do what MANGO members did, first and foremost, we wouldn't even gotten to the Capitol because we would have been shot dead. And secondly, the fact that Donald Trump, wait for it, Donald Trump and his fans celebrate the January 6th insurrectionists, right? These are people, wait.
Why aren't you answering my question?
I will. I kept quiet.
It's a bad answer.
ain't no way he's giving that energy when this MFer on the side was refusing to answer his question and he was putting on kid gloves. Ain't no way. Bro, like, come on.
He doesn't want to answer it.
No, I am. January 6th, violent insurrectionists, MAGA members attacked Capitol Police, number one. They invaded the Capitol. They smeared shit in the Capitol. Some of them came with weapons with the intention to assassinate Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi. And some of the violence that was done against 140.
But why aren't you answering my question?
No, hold on a second.
You gotta answer my question.
So 41 minutes. I don't need to rewind on how he was acting for this guy versus how he's acting for this guy. Night and day in terms of the energy.
Jacob, I will come to you. Jacob, I'll come to you. The moment he's answered my question, I'll come to you, Jacob.
Yeah. So no BLM protesters or Antifa protesters participated in a violent insurrection. Number one, none of them attacked the police like January 6th insurrectionists who were praised by Donald Trump. And number three, if they did
attack police. They did attack police.
Right wing.
Many BLM rioters attacked police. What are you talking about?
Did they take flagpoles and beat the police?
Sorry, many BLM rioters attacked police. On that point, let me bring back Winston. I mean, you know more about this than we do. But this idea, I certainly think there's merit to it. But this idea that there was a double standard in the collective way that the BLM protesters were treated compared to the collective way January 6th protesters were treated. What do you feel about that?
Well, here's the difference. Again, I'm glad we all can at least agree that violence on law enforcement is not okay. But here's the difference.
We don't all agree.
Again, I'm not condoning what happened to across any major city that experienced those in the summer of 2020. However, a city block in Minneapolis, even in downtown DC, is very different than the United States Capitol, which is our sacred hall of democracy. And this temple that, for me personally, I spent years making so many personal sacrifices in service to Congress and service to our nation. And so the difference there is, what happens rioting on the street. Of course, that's not okay, but that is very different than attacking on a specific day when a presidential election is being certified, the actual results. Again, we have not seen any credible evidence that the election was stolen besides the president's claims that it was in 2020.
I mean, I would say that. Okay, I would say, Winston, before I go to...
And then he tried... I wish me and Piers could talk in the person, so I can literally call him out for this, for this double standard that he claims is happening in BLM and January 6th, and the double standard now. These two MFers on the screen, the bald dude who's crazy, obviously, and the dude that obviously does too much coke, obviously. These two guys can go on a huge tangent saying the most ridiculous stuff that you disagree with, but the moment someone says that and something that is in against the Donald Trump message, then you interrupt. Piers. Howard.
Howard. I get your point that it happened at the Capitol, and therefore to the world watching, it was
fucking
worse.
Howard.
But in the end, violence is violence is violence. And statistically, there was a lot more violence collectively over the period of these BLM riots through that long, hot, very difficult summer than there was on January the 6th. And the
No,
feeling,
there wasn't, Piers.
well, there was.
No.
There was. A lot more people. A lot more people.
Yes, it was.
Well, a lot more people died.
Yes,
for
it
one.
was. It went on for
a lot more
months.
people died. A lot more police officers were attacked. Right. I mean, every statistic would suggest that there was a lot more violence over a longer, sustained period of time. And all I would say, Winston, is in the end, violence is violence is violence, particularly against police officers. You know, more police were attacked over that summer.
When you have violence with a political goal, that's the definition of terrorism. You know, so again,
That's what was happening in 2020, dude.
So Winston, are you
That's
saying?
what was happening in
again-
So
2020.
Winston, would you
That's what was
categorize?
happening in
Hang on,
2020.
Jacob. I will come to you. So Winston, would you categorize what happened on January 6th as an act of terrorism?
Well, you know, I mean, certainly by some, yes. And I think, you know, what the challenge here is in this conversation, the summer of 2020 has been so lumped in with this general thing. We can't talk about what happened that summer because each city was different, each experience of each officer was different. And so to sort of lump it all in together isn't really factual. You know, it's not fair to actually the facts. And again, I respect all those law enforcement officers who were injured that summer and who continue to serve. Same with Capitol Police too. But we cannot lump in riots that happened in Minneapolis versus other cities and then sort of compare, and then use that to justify what happened on January 6th. That's
Okay.
absolutely false.
Jacob, your response to that?
Yes. Okay, first of all, the media lied. What we saw with January 6th was a massive, massive politically motivated psyop that was based on a politically motivated setup. All right, all with the fingerprints of regime change, all with the hallmarks of
So and then Piers is going to let him go on his tangent. He's not going to push back. He's not going to interrupt him. He's going to let him say everything and anything, and he's not going to say a single thing to combat what he's saying because it's pro-MAGA.
regime change here. Now,
Watch.
look, when the media said that this was the worst attack on the Capitol in our nation's history, they were wrong because the Weather Underground literally bombed the Capitol. That's the left. Oh, and by the way, the guy Bill Ayers that was a part of the Weather Underground, the bombing of the Capitol, he was pardoned by Obama and later actually got involved with the Department of Education in the Obama administration. There's also the time that a bunch of Puerto Ricans actually shot congressmen inside the Capitol. I believe that was also a leftist cause as well. So what has happened and what we've seen with this J6 narrative is that the media has pushed this insurrection narrative over and over again. They've used trigger words and trigger images to create an instinctual and an emotional response in the subconscious mind, telling people their country and their democracy is under threat. And they made people like me their psyop poster boy, which was a very large mistake because the fact of the matter is nothing that they said about me on January 6th was true. They had the audacity to say that I call myself the QAnon shaman, for God's sake. None of that's true. So like every bit of the narrative of J6 is a lie. They told us that police officers died. That's not true. They knew it wasn't true. They avoided the fact of talking about the fact that actually 4 protesters died on that day, not just Ashley Babbitt, but Rosalind Boyland and 2 others, many of which were victims of police brutality. Okay, they didn't talk about the cover-up of Yogananda Pittman or Tom Manger when he came in. This thing stinks to high heaven, and anybody that can't see that it stinks and how it involves like nefarious agents within our own government or 51 intelligence agents or something, you got another thing coming.
No.
Jacob, what were you actually?
FBI informants. None of them were agents. That's just a lie. How's 9:30-ish?
Jacob, what were you actually convicted of?
I pled guilty to the 1512 charge, which is the obstruction of an official proceeding that the Supreme Court said was not applicable, and it's clearly it was being used to bend the law and gain convictions out of people that just trespassed into the building.
Vinny,
To
it's
stop
fascinating to talk to
the
Jacob. I have
certification
to
of
say,
the vote.
I didn't know which way the interview would go.
Okay.
It's been really interesting. It's been very interesting listening to Winston and hearing that perspective as well. What should
It's
we?
interesting to hear that perspective as well. Like I said, he let him talk. He didn't combat anything he said. He's praising him from his perspective. Fucking coward. Piers Morgan is a goddamn coward. Jesus Christ. I don't respect this dude.
Learn from all this. Obviously, nobody ever wants to see what happened that day happen again. This is one of the great symbols of American democracy, the greatest, arguably, the Capitol. You don't ever want to see that kind of thing again.
No, you don't. And the thing is, we have
Sorry,
to start
Jacob. That was
democracy
for
because that's
Vinny,
not what
actually.
it is.
That was for Vinny, actually. Sorry.
Oh, I'm
Jacob.
sorry.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's all good, Jacob. Well, Piers, I mean, at the end of the day, this violent rhetoric that Wad was talking about, like the violent rhetoric, the majority of it, the 99% of it was from the other side. And Piers, you guys keep talking about free and fair election and there's no evidence. You want me to believe the same justice system that has been trying to destroy Trump for freaking 9 years to believe them when it comes to an election, Piers. I don't. The irregularities were all over the place. Your guys' circle, your bubble, you don't see it. We've seen it.
Well, no,
okay?
what I would say,
I've seen the
Vinny,
documentary.
no, Vinny, to be clear, what I would say is even Republican judges.
The only time he pushes back is when they attack him individually.
Have not established that. So even the judges on your side have not been able to establish what you're saying.
Well,
He lost.
Piers,
It's
Piers,
okay.
I don't
He
have a
lost in
side.
2020.
I'm not a Republican. Piers, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not, Piers. I vote for what's right, okay? I vote for what's right and what's wrong. And the Republican,
No, you vote because you're a fucking bot who just believes in MAGA bullshit. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. Hopefully this cursing is not going to get me in trouble. But like, oh my god, it's just... it's just these type of people, like MAGA supporters on the ground who are just like the average day citizen, sure. But these people are so dangerous. The stuff that they try to pull and push to people like they're supposed to be like this arbiters of justice. It's just so dangerous.
When you say
It's
Republican, you
kinda-
label
it's
Republican. Liz
disgusting.
Cheney's a Republican.
Right.
Who the hell in the Republican Party trusts her, Piers? So yes, Piers, the day was ugly.
So now we don't
guarantee this
trust
guy can't even
Republicans.
define insurrection.
Don't trust
Nobody
Republicans, don't
nobody
trust
shooting, nobody
Democrats,
was
we
doing
just trust
anything.
Donald
They were
Trump.
pissed off, Piers,
Bye.
and they had a right to be pissed off. And like I said it again, if you have a problem with the system, Piers, you go to the system. You don't burn down your city. And he was saying, how long did the BLM riots go for? Cops were murdered, and he's saying nothing violent happened. They were throwing Molotov cocktails that were hitting police officers. And if we don't want it, Piers, we don't want this to ever happen again. Okay, we have to be open, we have to be transparent. Okay, when questions are asked, the government has to answer them, Piers. And when the president, the sitting president, requests 10,000 National Guard troops, his request should be answered. Okay, Piers? It was a
Okay,
shit
may I
show from the
respond very
beginning
quickly?
to the end, and Pelosi and them wanted it. Let me finish. And they used it, Piers. They've been using it. Just like Russia collusion didn't work, Piers. This was their Russian collusion of 2000 for this
All right,
election.
all
They
right.
thought this was going to be the, oh, got you.
Okay, Wajahat, you got literally like 30 seconds to respond quickly.
Yeah, I think it's very important that Enrique Tarrio and Stuart Rhodes are coming home. These are people who said they were part of a violent right-wing group. They said that they're the army of Donald Trump, and Stuart Rhodes said that he is for a civil war. 14 people were convicted for seditious conspiracy. More than any other time since the Civil War, these are the people that MAGA, Vinny, and Donald Trump are celebrating as patriots and hostages who wounded 140 Capitol Police officers and engaged in a violent insurrection to overthrow our free and fair election, which Joe Biden won in 2020.
But you know the
Shame on all
difference,
of them.
Wajahat, between
Shame on all
you know the difference between the pardons that Trump did and the pardons that Biden did is that we don't even know what Biden was pardoning.
I'm done. Piers Morgan. I lost all. I already had no respect for Piers, so it's like at this point, should I be surprised? Nope, not at all. Piers Morgan is a coward. I wonder if anybody. Let me check his comment section. Anybody in the comments calling out Piers? Okay, yeah, it's just full of MAGA supporters. Not surprising. That's his base. That's his base. That's what is getting him millions of views. I'm not surprised because I say one thing that's pro-Trump, I would get hella views. Donald Trump supporters ride or die for their fellow Donald Trump content creators. I respect it. It's so hard to get a base that is like nuanced like mine because people don't want nuance. They want to be radical. That's what people want. They don't want to be nuanced. They don't want to be educated informers. They just want to be radical. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth.